There's a fundamental misunderstanding about what an empath's light actually is. People tend to think of it as kindness, warmth, or emotional sensitivity, and while those are part of it, they're only the surface. At its core, an empath's light is awareness. It's perception. It's the ability to see what is there without distortion, without denial, and without the layers of self-deception most people rely on to stay comfortable. And that's where the tension begins. Because when you carry that level of awareness, you don't just see beauty, you see contradiction. You see when someone says one thing but feels another. You notice the subtle shifts in tone, the hesitation in their words, the emotional undercurrents they're trying to suppress. You pick up on what's unresolved, what's hidden, what's avoided. And the important part is this. You don't have to point it out. You don't have to confront it. Your mere presence is enough. That's what people react to. Most individuals spend a significant portion of their lives managing internal discomfort by avoiding it. They build identities around who they think they are, not who they actually are. They create narratives that protect their ego, justify their behavior, and keep deeper insecurities buried. This isn't necessarily malicious. It's human. It's a psychological defense mechanism. But it comes at a cost. It requires constant maintenance, constant denial, and constant reinforcement. Now, introduce an empath into that environment. An empath doesn't play by those rules, not because they're trying to disrupt anything, but because they can't unsee what they see. Their awareness cuts through pretense. Their presence disrupts illusion, not aggressively, not intentionally, but inevitably. And when someone who is deeply invested in their own self-image comes into contact with that kind of clarity, something uncomfortable happens. They feel exposed. Not exposed in a literal sense where secrets are revealed out loud, but internally exposed. It's the feeling that someone sees more than you're showing, that they understand something about you that you haven't fully admitted to yourself. And for many people, that feeling is deeply unsettling. Now, here's where it becomes psychologically interesting. Most people don't respond to that discomfort by becoming curious. They don't say, "Why do I feel seen right now?" Or "What part of myself am I avoiding?" Instead, they externalize it. They look for a source outside of themselves to blame for the discomfort. And the easiest target is the empath. So what begins as silent recognition turns into subtle resistance. Maybe it shows up as dismissiveness. Maybe it's passive-aggressive comments. Maybe it's a sudden shift in attitude that feels disproportionate to anything you've actually done. From the empath's perspective, it can feel confusing because there was no conflict, no confrontation, no obvious trigger. But the trigger was never external. It was internal. Your presence challenged something they weren't ready to face. And this is where resentment starts to take shape, not as a loud, obvious emotion, but as something quieter and more insidious. It builds beneath the surface. It's masked as indifference, sarcasm, or even forced politeness. But underneath it is a very specific psychological dynamic. You represent a level of honesty they're not living in alignment with. And people don't resent what they don't notice. They resent what reminds them. What makes this even more complex is that empaths often try to compensate for this tension. They sense the discomfort even if they don't fully understand it, and they try to soften their presence. They become more agreeable, more accommodating, more careful with their words. They dim their awareness in an attempt to make others feel safe. But that doesn't solve the problem because the issue was never what you said or did. It was what you represent. You can't negotiate with someone's internal conflict. You can't manage their discomfort for them. And the more you try to shrink yourself to avoid triggering it, the more you reinforce a dynamic where your clarity becomes something you feel responsible for hiding. That's not sustainable. At a deeper level, what's happening here is philosophical as much as it is psychological. Your light isn't just about being emotionally attuned. It's about being aligned with truth. And truth has a unique property. It doesn't require force to be disruptive. It simply exists. And in doing so, it challenges anything that isn't aligned with it. So when someone reacts negatively to your presence, it's not always a reflection of something you've done wrong. Often, it's a reflection of something they're not ready to see clearly. And this is the critical shift in understanding. Their resentment is not a rejection of your value. It's a reaction to their own dissonance. Once you recognize that, your role changes. You stop trying to fix the reaction, and you start understanding the pattern. You stop internalizing their discomfort and you start observing it with clarity. You realize that being seen as too much, too intense, or too aware is often just another way of describing a level of perception that challenges the status quo. And not everyone is ready for that. The goal, then, is not to reduce your awareness or dilute your presence. It's to understand the responsibility that comes with it. To know when to engage, when to step back, and when to accept that not every environment or every person is capable of meeting you at that level. Because light doesn't just illuminate what's beautiful, it reveals what's hidden. And not everyone resents the light because of what it is. Some resent it. Interpret your evolution through the lens of their own limitations. To accept that being understood is not always a prerequisite for being aligned. Because once you reach a certain level of awareness, your responsibility shifts. It's no longer about being perceived correctly by everyone around you. It's about living in a way that is internally consistent, even if that consistency creates external friction. And when you can hold that position without resentment of your own, something changes. You stop seeing their reaction as a personal rejection. You start seeing it as a reflection of where they are. And that perspective allows you to move forward without carrying unnecessary weight, without trying to fix what isn't yours to fix, without shrinking to preserve connections that require you to be less than what you've become. Because growth is not just about becoming more, it's about becoming more honest. And honesty, when fully lived, has a way of separating what is aligned from what is not. So if there's something to take from this, it's this. Your growth will not always be celebrated by those who benefit from your previous version. And that's not a reason to slow down. It's a reason to keep going. Because the moment you start questioning your evolution to maintain someone else's comfort is the moment you begin to abandon the very progress that made you stronger. And the cost of that is far greater than any distance growth might come.